In the year 817, a quiet Tennessee night falls like a velvet shroud, and a family's wooden homestead creaks under the weight of whispers that refuse to stay silent. The air tastes of smoke and rain, and a voice, not spoken by any living mouth, threads through the darkness, naming names and casting shadows where lantern light should spill. Across the margins of a sprawling frontier, history holds its breath as the bells toll not for celebration, but for the first echoes of a mystery that will outlive its own era. From the frost-laced road to the parlor where letters crackle with fear, the tale widens into a corridor of faces and fates, each one a hinge on a door that has not yet learned to close. Footsteps stutter in the dust, and a presence unbidden steps beside the Bell family, measuring their courage in breath and bone. The archives awaken, the ink, the grooves of a quill, the tremor of a witness's hand, and the room grows colder, as if the history itself leans forward to listen, to judge, to reveal. This is a story whispered through generations, where a single assertion that a malevolent voice could bend the will of the living collides with the stubborn pulse of a nation still forming its myths. In the margins, wait testimonies, letters, and rumors that will entice the curious, haunt the skeptical, and defy easy truth. A legend stands at the crossroads of fear and memory, ready to illuminate how a haunting becomes a culture, how a house becomes a history, and how the world begins to measure its own darkness against the Bell Witch. Picture this. A moonlit night drapes the Tennessee frontier in iron and frost, the Bell homestead standing like a timber sentinel against a growing hush that crawls through the pines. The air is an animal of its own, sharp with cold and damp with rain, a living memory that refuses to release its grip on the house, the fields, and the breath of those who inhabit them. You can hear the boards creak under the weight of something unseen, a whisper edging along the corridor or a clock ticks with deliberate, ominous patience. The year is 717, the dawn barely a rumor, and already the boundary between the ordinary and the uncanny feels dangerously thin. As your eyes adjust to the dim, you notice the glow of a lamp wavering, not from wind, but from something that wants to be seen. And then, abruptly, silence returns with the gravity of a verdict. From the edge of the forest, the night seems to lean closer, as if listening for a confession that is not yet formed. The Bell family's simple routine, firelight, kettle steam, the cadence of chores, has the rhythm of a story that has not yet decided its ending. A cold draft travels through the parlor, lifting the pages of a letter and turning a moment of domestic calm into a doorway into a deeper pain. The room grows heavier with every breath you take, and the shadows gather like witnesses awaiting a spill of truth. In that hush, you sense a presence that does not inhabit the lungs of any living being, a force that speaks without mouth or tongue, a mechanism of fear that operates by suggestion, by the tremor of a floorboard, by the rasp of a chair across the floor. The Bell homestead sits on the margin between memory and myth, a place where the air tastes of rain and rumors, where the future seems to bend toward a reckoning that has not yet been named. The land itself seems to remember the hardness of work and the fragility of faith, and the house becomes a vessel for those memories to crystallize into something we can all recognize, a story that refuses to die. You feel it as a pulse beneath the floorboards, a heartbeat that sinks with the crack of a log, the sigh of a doorway, the moment when a child's toy rolls by itself, stopping at the edge of a shadow and then returning to stillness as if nothing had occurred. The night is pregnant with questions, and the questions themselves carry a chill that slides through skin and bone, inviting you to listen for a truth that might be too heavy to bear. What begins as a routine evening unfolds into something larger, a harbinger that the ordinary can shelter nothing for long. A rumor travels faster than a wagon wheel. A whisper travels faster than a letter can carry it. And fear travels faster than reason. In this space, the line between witness and participant blurs, and the Bell family's ordinary names, Hannah, Richard, John Bell, appear in margins of pages stained with candle wax and time. The legend starts with a voice that should not exist, a voice that finds its way through the seams of the house and into the breath of the people who sleep under its roof. It is a voice that questions, that mocks, that tests loyalties, and it makes a home feel suddenly compromised, as if the roof itself were listening for a sign that the world beyond the walls has begun to crumble. In the margins of Tennessee frontier life, the Bell family becomes the first audience to a performance that will outlive the actors themselves. The night gathers its evidence in silence, yet the room speaks in a chorus of sighs and tremors. A chorus that will persist long after the candles gutter and the letters fade. The initial nights are not the climax. They are the foundations. The stones set in place to bear the weight of every subsequent rumor, every later testimony, every theory that would attempt to explain what began here and continues to echo through time. And while the stories will multiply, the core remains. A family, a house, a voice that arrives from nowhere and installs itself inside the hearts of those who dare listen. You are here to witness the moment when fear steps from the dark into the light of a new era of storytelling. When history begins to wear the mask of legend and refuses to remove it. The Bell homestead feels newly awake as the night deepens, a wooden chest with 1,000 sighs stored beneath its floorboards. A draft threads through the seams, carrying a whisper that seems both intimate and immense, as if the house itself has rehearsed this moment for years. In the kitchen, the kettle hisses with a steam that sounds almost like a voice, answering a question no one asked. And the family gathers the edges of their doubt with quiet hands. Outside, the wind writes messages through the branches, and every leaf carries a memory that refuses to fade away. The second chapter of Fear begins not with a scream, but with a memory that returns with peculiar timing. An old ledger, buried in a trunk, reveals entries that blend routine accounts with sudden, unexplained expenses, repairs, healings, and tokens given to strangers who appeared only in the margins of the family's life. These entries form a map that points toward a truth that refuses to stay put, like a river that splits and flows in two directions at once. Within the walls, a clock keeps perfect time, yet its sound carries an irregular heartbeat, a reminder that time here might bend when the unseen is watching. Visitors arrive in the photograph of a season, faces etched with the dust of roads and the gravity of rumors. A neighbor with a careful smile recounts a night when a chair moved on its own, a chair that had weight and history, as if it had decided to endorse a memory that needed witnesses. A clerk from a distant county speaks of letters that never reached their destination, of stamps that appeared and disappeared in a way that suggested someone else was writing the story with them. These testimonies do not condemn or vindicate. They merely extend the frame, offering more angles from which to view a single, unresolved question about what the Bell family felt compelled to endure, and why fear chose this particular house as its stage. The instance that marks the middle of this growing record is not a single event, but a sequence of impressions that accumulate like frost across a window. A child hears a tone in the night that seems to pluck a string in the air, a note that resonates with an old lullaby sung by a grandmother long gone. The mother attends to the bowl of fruit on the table, and the fruit falls without impact, as though an invisible hand had chosen to remove it from sight rather than damage it. These moments do not scream. They accumulate into a chorus of small occurrences that compel the family and the reader to pause and consider the possibility that the house is listening back, calculating, weighing, and choosing its next response. Meanwhile, the stories that travel between neighbors, merchants, and distant relatives begin to braid into something denser, a fabric of belief and doubt that covers every room in the Bell household. Letters arrive with ink softened by time, letters that carry advice, warnings, and questions that have no easy answers. In one such letter, a relative cautions that fame can corrupt memory, that legends often begin in mercy but end with consequences that cannot be controlled. In another, a traveler writes of a night when the doors seemed to breathe, when the hinges spoke with a voice too measured to be a simple creak. The voices in these pages do not reveal a simple truth. They reveal the complexity of interpreting fear, a reminder that memory itself can shape what a person believes happened when the world grew too large to fit inside a single explanation. As the chapter folds toward its middle, the Bell House becomes a stage where the past rehearses for a future audience. The walls record the footsteps of those who came before, the voices that rose and fell with the cadence of their fears, and the inevitable tension between what can be proven and what must be imagined to survive. Those who hear the stories with skepticism are not spared either, for skepticism itself has a voice in this place, a counterpoint that argues for rational cause while still granting the power of awe to the unknown. And so the night continues to widen as if a circle drawn in chalk on a dusty floor, an outline that promises to become a figure only when the center is finally found. The chapter ends with a choice: to cling to the warmth of the hearth and the routine of daily life, or to step closer to the edge where the tale begins to breathe its own air. The Bell family chooses to listen, to permit a space for questions without surrender, to acknowledge that fear can illuminate as well as frighten. The house, for its part, chooses to endure, to stand as a repository of human fragility and resilience, a place where memory can be both a shield and a beacon. In the quiet that follows, the night grows heavier with possibility, and the reader is invited to stay, to witness, and to decide what kind of story a nation borrows when it is born from whisper and wood, from doubt and devotion, from the stubborn insistence of a family to remain intact when the world insists on reinterpreting their every breath. In the deepest hours of the night, the Bell House holds its breath, and the air becomes a pale, lucid sea of silence. A distant wind carries a sound that feels almost deliberate, as if someone is tapping a memory on the surface of the night, asking to be understood. The family moves with careful steps, aware that ordinary movement might awaken the uncanny. And they learn to listen with more than the ears, listening with skin and instinct as well as thought. The room opens wide in the darkness, revealing the arch of a doorway, a stairwell, and the glow of a single lamp that refuses to surrender its flame to fear. A new pattern emerges, not as a single incident, but as a sequence of sensorial clues that point toward a central question. Why this house? Why this family? Why now? The ledger's margins grow darker with each entry, and the ink seems to shift as if the words themselves have choices about what to record. A page bears the shape of a handprint, an impression made by a presence that stood still long enough to leave a mark, then vanished as if it never existed. The marks do not scream, they insinuate, inviting the reader to lean in and deduce what the margins already know, but will not declare openly. A visitor arrives with the gravity of someone who has carried a rumor from river towns and hill roads. A rumor that insists the Bell House is a vessel, not merely a house. The visitor speaks of a sequence of events that align with the turning of seasons, a choreography of fear that seems to respond to the natural world just as surely as it responds to human hands. The bells in the village square toll at odd hours, as though the town itself is listening for a sign, and the sound travels through fences, gardens, and windows, closing the circle of private space around the Bell family and turning it into a public recurrence of dread. Yet the visitor does not present a verdict. Instead, they offer alternatives, a menu of rational explanations that never quite satisfy the ache in the chest of those who hear the tale repeat in their minds. The narrative expands to include a more intimate gravity. The way love and fear can exist in the same room, how devotion can be weaponized by doubt, how faith can be tested by the unknown. The mother tends to the children with a tenderness that is almost ceremonial, a ritual of care that acknowledges the fragility of safety and the necessity of hope. In the corners, the shadows seem to lean closer, listening to the prayers whispered under breath, listening to the promises spoken aloud to keep the night from swallowing the day. The father meets the tremor in the room with steadiness, aligning his breath with the room's tempo, offering a stubborn center where fear would like a corner to hide. Together, they weave a quiet defense. Routines, rituals, and the stubborn insistence that ordinary life can be a shelter, even when the walls themselves feel as if they might crumble under the weight of a history that refuses to stay quiet. As the chapter proceeds, the larger architecture of the story reveals its double. It is at once a record of a haunting and a meditation on how communities bear witness. Neighborhood rumors arrive like wind-blown seeds, sprouting into debates about motive, intention, and the possibility of human complicity. Some speak of a poisoning or a threat hidden within the most intimate spaces. Others defend the idea that pain can be a purely non-human force that chooses its victims without malice or design. The tension between explanation and wonder becomes a thread that connects the family to the wider world, inviting readers to participate in the interpretation without surrendering to certainty. With the night stretching toward its denouement, a new sense of consequence settles over the Bell house. The voices that have haunted the margins now move toward the center, pressing for a response that can endure the test of time and memory. The chapters yet to come will carry the weight of what this mom. The Bell house settles into a heavier silence as the night grows older, and the walls seem to lean closer, as if listening for a promised answer. In the glow of a solitary lamp, a mother traces the line of a child's handwriting on a page that appears to lift itself from the desk, curling at the edges like a creature waking from sleep. The room breathes with the soft, patient rhythm of someone who has learned to wait for meaning to arrive with a careful, deliberate certainty. Outside, the wind presses the shutters and the branches in a language of their own, a language that seems to spell out consequences in the grain of the wood. A figure emerges from the archives of rumor into a more defined silhouette, a theory that the haunting may reflect a fracture within the family itself, a fault line created by fear, tension, and the pressure of expectation. Clerks, farmers, and former neighbors sit in rooms far from the Bell hearth and debate whether the source lies in the heart of jealousy, heredity, or a ritual of endurance that has grown beyond any single life. The pages of letters and the margins of ledgers become a chorus, each voice adding cadence to the same unresolved question. What is the true cost of a legend when it is borrowed by a nation looking for strength in its myths? The debate moves through the air like a draft that promises change even as it chills the skin. Within the house, a different kind of calculus takes shape, the calculus of memory. People who recall the earliest years of the Bell family begin to measure desire, loyalty, and fear against the clock that ticks with stubborn mercy. The children learn to recognize the pattern of a night that repeats itself in slightly altered tempo, a tempo that suggests an intelligent design rather than a random scattering of events. The mother keeps a ledger in her mind, noting moments when a door shifts its stance, when a kettle sings in an unfamiliar key, when a whisper chooses a moment to reveal itself and then withdraws again into the darkness. In these small, almost invisible details, the truth begins to acquire a texture. Not a single fact, but a surface made of layers, each one altering the light that falls upon the past. A critical moment arrives when a cousin arrives from a distant county with a bundle of photographs and a pair of questions that have traveled far. What does a memory owe to? The person who creates it. And what does a person owe to the memory that refuses to fade? The cousin speaks with honesty that feels almost clinical, listing incidents with the restraint of a clinician and the suspicion of a conspirator. The photographs show rooms that were once bright with sunlight and have since become testimonies etched in monochrome. Chairs that tilt without being pushed. Curtains that sigh as if they are tired of watching. A milk jug that tilts by itself and spills a perfect arc of whiteness onto a table that remembers every spill it has ever witnessed. Each image is a seed for speculation, a spark that can ignite a debate about agency, attribution, and the difference between a haunting as a moral experience and a haunting as a physical event. As the night deepens, the boundaries between private pain and public memory blur more than ever. The bell ringers of the village begin to hear the same murmur. A murmur that resembles a question asked across generations. What would a story become if every witness added a fragment? Every memory contributed a shade, and every fear wore a different coat. The implication is not that truth is slippery, but that truth is a living construct in a culture that wants to use fear as a bridge to unity. The Bell family learns to navigate this bridge with caution, balancing the need to protect each other with the necessity to listen. To listen to the voices that travel from the margins into the center. And to listen to the echoes that refuse to fade even when the candles burn low. In the final movements of the chapter, the tension between explanation and empathy comes to a head. A neighbor offers a simple, almost paternal observation. Fear can be a teacher as well as a tormentor, guiding a family toward resilience even when the night seems to press upon the bones. Another voice, more skeptical, insists that patterns can be misread, that coincidences can masquerade as meaning, and that the true enemy might be the longing for a narrative that can be controlled. The conversation does not end with a verdict. It ends with a quiet agreement to hold two truths at once. That the Bell House is a place where memory gathers, and that memory can serve as a kind of armor, as well as a window into the dangerous beauty of what a legend can become when a nation learns to recognize itself in its fear. As dawn approaches, the rooms brighten with a pale light that arrives without fanfare, signaling not a conclusion, but a readiness to face another day of questions, another night of listening, another chapter where the ground beneath the house seems to breathe with the living history of a family and a country that has chosen to remember through the sound of whispers and the weight of witnesses. The Bell House stands at the edge of a daybreak that seems both hopeful and haunted. A paradox etched into the pale horizon, as if light itself hesitates before speaking. The family gathers around the kitchen table, where the cups tremble slightly, as if the night still clings to their handles. And every clink of porcelain feels like a vote cast in a collective memory that refuses to be forgotten. The air carries a scent of ash and rain, a reminder that the past is not a closed room, but a corridor that stretches into the future, with doors that might unlock only by facing what has been left unsaid. In this chapter, the narrative turns toward the moment when memory arrives at a verdict, not with certainty, but with the acknowledgement that memory itself is a form of testimony. A letter surfaces from a drawer, its handwriting steady and determined, carrying a date that anchors a turning point in the household's moral geography. The letter speaks of responsibility, of the boundaries between fear and harm, and of a decision made in a moment of desperation that may have altered the course of many lives. As readers, we are invited to weigh the words against the silent witnesses of the house. The creaking floor, the settled dust, the breath that fogs the window when a chilly gust enters without invitation. Outside, the town begins to speak in a cadence that mirrors the tempo of a trial. Questions become arguments, arguments become narratives, and narratives become the living record of a culture wrestling with what fear can do when it is allowed to own a place. A traveling scribe arrives with a bundle of affidavits and accounts, offering a framework by which to see the Bell story as a public document rather than a private obsession. Yet, even as these documents are laid out, the chapter asks a more intimate question. How much of fear is driven by human intention? And how much is born from the human need to explain the inexplicable? The scribe's pen moves with care, but there is a stubbornness in the shadows that refuses to yield every answer to the light of a desk lamp. The family's oldest child, now on the cusp of adulthood, discovers a voice within that can articulate doubt without surrendering faith. This voice asks whether belief can survive exposure to doubt, whether a community can hold on to reverence for those it loves, while admitting the possibility that the beloved might have supported or even generated the very fear that haunts them. The question is not merely theoretical. It sits at the kitchen table where a shared meal once gathered, now a forum for deliberation about what a family owes to each other and to the wider society that has begun to claim the Bell legend as a national touchstone. In these moments, the ritual of gathering becomes a ritual of responsibility, a new kind of closeness formed in the crucible of memory and scrutiny. As the daylight grows, the house reveals another layer to the story. The possibility that the haunting was a composite, assembled from multiple sources, each contributing its own fragment to a larger mosaic. Some fragments are personal, grief, envy, fatigue, while others are cultural, born of a frontier community wrestling with its own identity, its own myths, and its own power to shape the narrative that will outlive the people who first spoke it. The chapters of this mosaic do not align perfectly, and the reader is reminded that peace in memory often requires a tolerance for discord, a willingness to hold contradictions in a single, living frame. The tension between coherence and ambiguity becomes a central theme, a reminder that truth in a living memory is not a single seal, but a collection of stamps pressed onto a page of history by many hands over time. In the closing pages of this chapter, a deliberate quiet takes hold. The family and their town acknowledge the risk of simplification, the danger of turning fear into a convenient moral. They choose instead to treat memory as a responsibility, a burden and a privilege, a steady lamp that can guide a community toward wisdom without demanding blind acceptance. The Bell House, once a stage for private terrors, now stands as a beacon for collective reflection, a place where a nation learns to listen with humility to the impulses of its own legends. The final images are humble and striking. A dawn-lit porch, a journal left open on a chair, a window that catches the light and refracts it into 1,000 patient facets. In these small, careful details lies the possibility. Dawn breaks with a pale insistence that refuses to hurry, spilling a cold, clear light into the Bell kitchen and coloring the wood with a quiet honesty. The family moves through the room like figures in a dawn-lit painting, each breath measured, each gesture deliberate, as if every action might shift the shape of memory itself. A soft wind slips through a crack and carries with it a scent of damp earth and old rain, a reminder that the past remains tied to the soil that sustains the family and the town. In this brightness, the ordinary objects take on new meanings, their surfaces glinting with the possibility that what they once concealed might now be acknowledged and understood. The chapter pivots on a stark encounter between light and doubt. A lamp, long the sentinel of night, flickers with an irregular rhythm that mirrors the heartbeats of those who listen for truth. The flicker is not mere malfunction, but a conversation with the night, a signal that something in the room is engaged in a quiet, patient negotiation with reality. The family gathers around the table, the steam from the kettle curling upward like a breath of history rising from the present. In this circle, confession becomes a shared act, not to condemn, but to connect, to place each memory within a frame that allows for mercy as well as accountability. Outside, the street wakes slowly, and the soundscape of the town shifts from rumor to reason, from fear to inquiry. A town crier speaks in measured tones, repeating the questions that have defined the Bell story for generations. What is the boundary between a haunting and a tragedy? Between a protective impulse and harm done in the name of fear? The crier's voice lands on the ears of farmers, merchants, and children who listen with the innocence of those who still believe in the possibility that a mystery can be measured, weighed, and understood without surrendering its power to astound. The bell in the square tolls once, as if marking a moment of responsibility rather than a warning, and the ripple of sound echoes through alleys, stores, and homes, a reminder that a community's myths travel as easily as wind or rain. Within the walls, a quiet experiment unfolds. The family attempts to document the spectrum of experience without forcing a singular interpretation. They test hypotheses with careful, collaborative discipline, writing down questions rather than conclusions. A husband and wife debate with a patient tenderness, coaxing the truth from each other the way a blacksmith guides metal into shape, slowly, with heat and pressure, until a document appears that can endure the scrutiny of a public eye. The children offer perspectives colored by youth, curiosity, and a longing for ordinary certainty, reminding the adults that memory is not only a ledger of pain, but a repository of wonder and possibilities yet to be explored. The house becomes a workshop where fear is weighed beside hope, where every observation is treated as a potential thread that could unravel the knot of uncertainty if pulled with care. The narrative also widens to consider how the Bell story, while anchored in a particular family, reflects a larger national impulse. The desire to translate the unknown into something legible, something that could bind a people together under a shared banner of caution and curiosity. A circle of neighbors and scholars gather in the old courthouse to compare notes, to test theories, to listen for the music of truth as it might exist beyond the clamor of sensationalism. Some argue for rational explanations born of stress, fatigue, and the strains of frontier life. Others insist that the emotional truth of fear can have a real, physical presence in a room. The dialogue is not a verdict, but a map, guiding readers toward an understanding that myths are not merely stories, but instruments through which communities navigate the moral landscape of their time. As the chapter draws toward its close, the light begins to waver again, not with fear, but with a mature, tempered anticipation. This family recognizes that the road ahead will demand more of them than superstition or bravado. It will require humility, curiosity, and a willingness to hold complexity with grace. They commit to continuing the collection of testimonies, to refining their questions,